It's like, and those who don't believe, they are blind, they're dumb, deaf, and blind, and they will be punished, and so on. And this is just the whole sentiment of the Quran and how it goes. Among all the religious books that I have encountered and read, the Quran is the worst book.
That's a big statement.
Condemning others left and right, promising hellfire, in very graphic ways, saying those who don't believe, we will put them in the fire of hell, and they will be skinned, and we will put their skin back on so that they can feel the pain again, and so on. Just like, this is the kind of stuff that you learn. Just behave, listen, or else. Others are evil and messed up. Don't trust anyone else. Don't you see how the sun goes somewhere at night? It actually goes to a place where it stops for a while and then it comes back in the morning again. But these very primitive ways of describing the earth and the natural world around us made me have doubts from the very beginning that I tried to suppress very, very much because I knew better.
Hey, my name is Shelise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening and you'd prefer to see our faces, go to our YouTube channel at Cults to Consciousness. We love it when you guys interact with the video. It helps us. It boosts the algorithm. It makes our guests feel welcome and supported. We love seeing those words of encouragement down in the comments below, and we just really appreciate it, and we love to hear what you have to say. So today's guest, we reached out to him when we were deciding to cover Islam because, of course, he has an enormous YouTube channel that is doing so well where he covers all things Islam. And today we're going to dive into his story. So I'm really excited to bring him on. If you haven't heard the full extent of his story, we're going to cover it all here today. Thank you so much for joining us, Apostate Prophet.
Thank you so much, Shelise. Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here. I recently became aware of your channel, and I see the growth and the production value and everything that you have. I love it so far. So it makes me happy to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And it's just always nice to connect with other creators, of course, and understand the grind behind all of it. And it does take a lot of work. And so I appreciate what you're doing, spreading awareness, and everything that you're doing over on your channel is so helpful. I was binge watching a whole bunch of your videos before we came on here today just to educate myself. And so we're just going to dive into your story today. So I guess where we should start is just, maybe the beginning where your parents grew up and how you got involved.
Right. So I was born in Germany to a Turkish Muslim family, to a family of immigrants who arrived there, I think in the 80s or something. Yeah. Because Germany had this whole program of inviting guest workers from different countries. They initially didn't want people from Turkey because it was a different culture and all that. But then due to different geopolitical issues, it was kind of enforced on Germany to invite people from Turkey as well. So my grandparents and my parents were some of those people who did move to Turkey and began working there and living there. I was born into one of those families, and my family was a very religious one, a very religious Sunni Muslim family. Growing up in that environment, I learned very early on to practice and to respect the Islamic beliefs. I wasn't always, as an early teenager, for example, very great at following the religion or very, very keen on it. I wasn't really very willing. I did become quite religious later on when we moved to Turkey, because my parents had this whole idea that Germany is a non-Muslim, infidel country where Muslims are not actually supposed to live unless they have good reasons to live there. So they wanted to move to Turkey, and eventually did it when I was at the age of 16. That's when we moved to Turkey. And in Turkey, I had a little bit of an identity crisis. A little bit is really a huge understatement here. I had a big identity crisis in Turkey. Went into political activities, was rebelling against society, and went into becoming a revolutionary communist and things like that, totally at odds with my family. And later on, after a very tragic event where my aunt was killed, who was very close to me, I had a little bit of a change and became very religious and started dedicating myself to fully practicing and studying Islam and understanding it. And I was really very devout and really wanted to be part of it forever. I remember praying, studying, reading day and night, reading the Quran. But reading the Quran is actually where things started becoming problematic. The first time that I read it, I had doubts and questions and things that I didn't really understand and things that didn't really appeal to me and my values. But I tried to suppress them. The second reading of the Quran made me really go down a path of heavy questioning and being afraid of the questions in my head, which I tried to suppress. By the third time, I was already in the process of leaving Islam because of all the questions that I couldn't suppress anymore. So I'm really summarizing this whole huge, long process in very short, but that's basically what happened. And then I left Islam eventually after many years of questioning and fighting, and then eventually ended up becoming an atheist after being convinced that there is probably no God, and then started speaking out. And after a while, met a wonderful person on the internet who was from America, and we got together, and I moved to America and we got married and started a family together. And I started speaking out because here in America, I finally had the chance to speak out. In Turkey, I wanted to speak out. I wanted to go online and speak about Islam, but it's not legal. I would have gotten in severe legal troubles. So, and now I have this channel, Apostate Prophet, where I still have the same mission, where I want to tell people about what Islam is, what it actually teaches, and why people should stay away from it.
Okay, so that was your entire story in a nutshell. Of course, we're going to go back and get some details. But I think first, let's talk about the whole speaking out thing. So a lot of people who have come on the channel have been more concerned about their identity. You seem to be okay with it. So can you explain to those who aren't familiar why it's hard to speak out, or why it's in some cases against the law?
Islam is very unique in that it poses a great danger to speak out against the religion, because among all the religions in the world, Islam is the one that still to this day has a very strict concept of apostasy, where according to the Islamic traditional law, which Muslim scholars still generally agree on, apostates, so people who leave Islam and then publicly say that they have left Islam, are supposed to be put to death. And there are certain conditions and details around how the death penalty should be applied, whether the person can be given a chance to repent and return, how long the grace period, and so on. So the general agreement, agreed upon unanimously in Islamic history actually, is that apostasy is punishable by death. Today, there are still a dozen countries where on paper apostasy is punishable by death, which so many people are not aware of. There are certain other countries where apostasy is banned, and other countries where preaching to Muslims and trying to convert them is illegal and can get you in prison.
Wow.
Even if the legal standards don't exist, in the Muslim community, it is generally considered a great source of shame and humiliation upon the family and the community in general if somebody leaves Islam. So people who leave Islam face great threats. I have, over the years, met and become familiar with so many people who left Islam and who are hiding and running because their friends, family members, their parents, their fathers try to turn them over to certain people or to the state, or even try to kill them.
Oh my gosh.
Some are more accepting. My family knows by now, of course, inevitably, that I left Islam and that I speak out against it. For me, it wasn't that bad. It's just that my connections with most of the people that I have known throughout my life have been severely damaged. My father has said that he can no longer speak to me, so I haven't talked to him in many years. My mother, with her, my relationship is severely harmed. But this is the issue with Islam.
Okay. Now, there's people who may say, well, I would never do that to my family, or maybe even as far as saying that's not true. Do you think it's just because there's such a vast variety of ways in which it is practiced or adhered to, and obviously where you grow up?
There is, of course, such a factor. I would say that, so most Muslims do not really properly adhere to Islamic traditions and values. And In fact, most Muslims, if you ask them, would agree with me on that. We just mean different things when we say this, because most Muslims will argue that most Muslims are not practicing Islam well enough. Most Islamic countries are not proper Muslim. They should return to Islam and everything will be right and all that. What I mean by that is that most Muslims find great difficulty abiding by the laws of Islam because they are humans in the end as well. And as much as religion, religious influence and doctrine corrupts the mind, and as much as in a Muslim culture, people are much more accepting of such draconian laws and rules, Muslims are also humans in the end, and they fail to abide by certain traditions and certain laws and customs and so on. But there is also the aspect of Islam being practiced differently in different circles. Then there is a difference between the Shia Muslims and Sunni Muslims. There is a difference among Sunni Muslims, who are the majority, who are over 85% of Muslims, where some go a traditionalist path, others go a more mystical path or a slightly reformist path. Here is the problem. When people say that they don't think there is an apostasy law, or when people say, oh no, I would never do that, this is most often, this is just something that they are saying, because the Islamic religion or the Islamic branch, the Islamic school of thought that they abide by, has historically unanimously agreed that there is an apostasy law, an apostasy punishment.
Mm-hmm.
I have read all the books on Islamic law. I have many of them here with me, and they are quite explicit that without question, somebody who leaves Islam must be put to death because it is an act of treason. It's not just somebody letting go of their belief and having different opinions. It means you are betraying and harming the Muslim community, your family, everyone who knows you, and the general public. And the interests, the safety of the public are greater than your own safety and your own rights, which means it is justified to kill you.
Wow.
In fact, if people don't believe me, there is a YouTuber, Alidawa, who has over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. He's a Muslim apologist. Very popular. He was made the most popular Muslim YouTuber by Muslims themselves. He made a video a few years ago in which he infamously spoke directly to me, responding to me, said, yes, there is a capital punishment for apostasy because people like you, little weaklings who leave their religion and then cause corruption by spreading it, the capital punishment in Islam will be applied to you, and we are proud of that, and we will be watching when it happens.
Oh my gosh.
And that video is still out there, which people can look it up.
So are you not afraid at all of these threats?
No. There was a time where I was slightly concerned and where I did become a little bit paranoid because my inboxes would get filled with threats all the time and all kinds of abusive stuff. But it was also at that time that I started actually connecting with the FBI. And nowadays, the FBI is regularly in touch with me because of this. This is the situation. So it's so ridiculous that the FBI has to actually check on me and has to be in touch with me to see what's going on, if I'm receiving any threats, if there's anything credible or not. They ask me to forward things to them if I think there is anything serious. You don't get this stuff with any other religion.
No, I've never heard of the FBI contacting ex-Mormons. We're just like very insignificant on that scale.
Yeah. But I'm not afraid. While I think most people are just bluffing when they make death threats, there is always the possibility that somebody might try to harm me and somebody might try to kill me. And in fact, if I appeared in a certain place at a certain public spot repeatedly and announced it in advance, I am 100% sure that in no time there would be people who would try to kill me and harm me in some way. However, I'm not really afraid of it. What I think about is that this cause of speaking about Islam is very important. Even if they eventually harmed me, or even if they eventually killed me, this would just show that I really have a case here and that I was right all along. So I'm fine with that. I'm okay with accepting that. And I don't want to be. I am not the one who is supposed to be hiding. I'm not the one who is supposed to be scared. They should be hiding because they are the ones who are violent and criminal and all that. I don't want to hide or be scared.
Yeah. Wow. So let's talk about how we got to this point. So let's go way back into Germany. What was it like being Muslim in Germany? Did you find it difficult to adhere to all of the practices, or what was that like?
Wow. So, Germany. I always liked throughout my life thinking back of my time in Germany, because I think that that I really internalized the Western German way of thinking, the Western culture, the German culture. I absorbed it very well. I adjusted very well, despite the fact that I come from such a family where we learned some really weird things and some really messed up things as well. So here is the problem. When I was a little young kid, when I would go to school, at school I would just be another kid, or another kid who looks slightly different and who believes in a different religion. That's it. But other than that, everything is quite okay. No prejudice necessary, and so on. At home, on the other hand, I would learn that I should always remember that I'm a Muslim first, and that the disbelievers, the Christians and Jews specifically, will never like us unless they can turn us away from our Islamic belief and we become one of them. This is actually not something that my family just taught me. This is directly in the Quran. It says that the Christians and Jews will never like you unless you become one of them, and whoever becomes one of them, Allah will never forgive them, or they will be punished. He's one of them. When I was in first grade, I learned something very messed up, which is very relevant today, actually. When I was in first grade, we went to a gathering, a religious gathering over the weekend at some point. There I learned lengthily about the apocalyptic prophecies and expectations that we have. And I learned that it is very likely that in the very near future, we as Muslims, as a collective, will fight in the end times for Allah, and that a specific group out there, the Jews, will be fighting us, and we will then be doing the final fight against the Jews, and we will kill them all. And even rocks and trees will say, "There is a Jew behind me, come and kill him."
Oh,
Except
wow.
for one tree, which is known as the Gargat tree, which is the tree of the Jews. Now, imagine for a second how messed up that was. I was in first grade. I was a little child. Of course, I took all of that as for a fact. I'm in Germany. I go to school on Monday, and I tell a friend of mine that this is what's going to happen, and I'm taking it very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up with that idea, with that hatred, this hatred for the Jews, for the disbelievers, for the Christians, for non-believers in general. And it is hard to be in this dilemma where, on the one hand, you really like these other people that you are around and then that you are interacting with, but on the other hand, at home, you learn that these people are basically eventually your enemies, and that you are not supposed to befriend them or trust them. It also says in the Quran, "Do not befriend the Christians and the Jews. They are friends of one another. Whoever befriends them is one of them." So these are not things that my parents just came up with. These are things that they directly took from the Quran, because they were always very religious. And there's so much more in there. But I don't know if you want me to go on ranting about this aspect of it, you know?
Yeah, I do think it's interesting because I think it adds a lot of context. And if you could also talk about how in one of your videos you mentioned that in the beginning of the Quran, it's saying that you can practice whatever you want, or the Jews and the Christians are okay, but then it switches. So maybe just addressing that as well.
This is actually a very, very important question and a very important point. So thank you for bringing that up. And this is something that causes a lot of confusion among people who don't know Islam very well and who don't understand Islam, or who were just introduced to Islam. And in all honesty, this is something that really made me angry after I left Islam, and when I looked into the world and saw how, especially in the West, Muslim preachers and apologists present Islam as this peaceful and good religion where Jews and Christians are totally fine. Here is the thing. I was also, with my family together as a religious Muslim, engaged in preaching to non-Muslims, to Christians and others. I know the tactics, and I know this might sound a little bit harsh, but these are tactics and these are lies. It is not true that Islam is welcoming and accepting and tolerant and loving of other religions. What happened with the Quran is the Quran was revealed, as they say it, over a period of time of 23 years in the lifetime of Muhammad. When Muhammad was first starting out in Mecca, he was in a polytheistic Arab environment where he apparently felt ostracized, lonely. He didn't like the society that he was in. He didn't like the pagan customs and all that. And he encountered Christians and Jews on his travels or in different circumstances. And he really liked the Jewish and Christian way of believing and practicing. And he had this idea of worshiping the one God. The story goes that Muhammad would go in seclusion to a cave where he would meditate for extended periods of time, and where then one day he encountered the angel Gabriel, known as Jibril in Islam. And that angel then started giving him revelations from Allah, which then become the Quran. So the Quran is Allah directly speaking through the angel Gabriel to Muhammad, and then people collecting this and writing this down, which is why the Quran is considered the unchanged, direct word of Allah himself. Because of this attitude toward Jews and Christians, in the first years when he was in Mecca and he was only dealing with polytheists, the Quran had a rather peaceful and embracing and good approach toward Jews and Christians, as opposed to the polytheists, which it was criticizing severely. However, after a while, the hijrah happened. Hijrah means the migration from Mecca to the city of Medina by the Muslims, because they couldn't live among the polytheists anymore, because Muhammad was very inflammatory in his language toward them, and the stories that they started persecuting the Muslims. So they moved to this new city, Medina, which was a city that was built by Jews and made prosperous. Muhammad then started preaching to Jews. He then quickly realized that the Jews there didn't really agree with his ideas, and they actually considered him ignorant and laughable and just a pretender who is pretending to be a prophet and who's pretending to speak in the name of the same God. They didn't accept him. Over time, the Quran's verses, as he interacted with the Jews, became increasingly more hostile toward Jews, accusing them of being deceptive by nature, deceptive altogether, trying to lie to God, killing their prophets, and therefore being doomed. And it even includes a phrase that says, "And you will find the Christians the closest to you, and you will find the Jews and the polytheists the most harsh toward you." This is something that I also learned as a religious Muslim. So another way to vilify the Jews. And Muhammad ended up, under different pretenses, expelling or eradicating all Jewish tribes in the city of Medina after he took that city over. And that was the issue with the Jews. Later on, when he started encountering Christians, it didn't go well with the Christians either. He was good with them until that point, but when the Christians didn't accept his message, he started condemning them as well, which is how we end up with Quran chapter 9, which is, chronologically speaking, the last chapter to be revealed. So it comes at the very end of Muhammad's lifetime. That chapter is the most brutal chapter in the Quran. It starts with warnings and war against the polytheists. Then in verse 20 to 32, it then talks about how the polytheists, excuse me, are unclean and should not approach the holy site. And it then says in chapter 9, verse 29, that the Muslims are to fight all those who don't believe in Allah and in Muhammad and who don't accept the true religion from the Jews and the Christians. It then further says in verse 30 that the Jews and Christians are wicked and corrupted, and may Allah destroy them, and uses their corruption as justification to fight them. So at that point, Islam has become completely hostile toward Christians, Jews, polytheists, and everybody else. And the general command is then to fight all disbelievers until they convert to Islam or pay protection money and become your subjects. If they fail to to pay protection money, they become fair game. This was also the policy throughout Islamic history. And Muhammad himself is then reported to have said, I have been sent by Allah to fight and kill the people until they testify that there's no God but Allah and I am his messenger.
Thank you for sharing all of that. That adds a lot of context. So growing up, in your specific case, were you never aware of the initial verses where it was more peaceful towards other people? It was only just the more violent messages.
I was mostly told about the violent and hostile ones. I was, however, also at some point, I'm not sure at what point, but I do remember being, as a child, being taught that the Quran also does say that that Jews and Christians will be accepted and there is no fear upon them, and so on. And the context that I then learned about this, and this is, as I found out later when I studied it myself, this is the traditionally understood context of it. Later on, of course, after Muhammad's death, this is how Islamic scholars started interpreting it. They interpreted it in such a way that that the Jews and Christians were only good and accepted until Muhammad arrived and brought the Quran and introduced the Islamic religion. After that, they are no longer accepted. In fact, the Quran very explicitly, after this whole development, says, and for anyone who seeks a religion other than Islam, it will not be accepted of him, and he will be in the hellfire forever. And along with all the commands to fight them and punish them. So I was taught about those peaceful verses, but was taught that the context is that it just refers to the Jews and Christians before Islam arrived.
That makes sense. And so now someone who comes across that verse may not understand the context in which the scholars are teaching it and twist it in a way to say, no, you guys are wrong. It's peaceful. That makes sense.
Precisely.
So how was this for you as a child? I'm sure it was really confusing. Were you allowed to have friends, or were you told not to even talk to any of the other kids at school who weren't Muslim?
It was mixed. I was generally told by my parents and encouraged to only have Muslim friends and to only have friends among other Turkish immigrants and descendants of immigrants. It was always disapproved of if I had friends that were not Muslim. The difficult part of this is that in Germany, the education system is a little bit different, where after the 4th grade in some or most of the German states, if you perform above a certain level, you go into a higher, form of school. Most immigrants would not go to that school. I did perform very well and went to that school, and my environment was then consisted then of 99% non-Muslims. So I was always surrounded by non-Muslims, and inevitably I started befriending them and being, and being okay with them and having them as close friends. My parents never really approved of it. This is so funny, actually. During my whole time in Germany, because I had many non-Muslim friends, I was always under strict control of how long I can stay outside, not supposed to stay outside after it gets dark, and so on. As soon as we moved to Turkey, suddenly all the rules about staying outside and who I can be friends with and not be friends with became totally relaxed, despite the fact that Germany is significantly safer, that the place we lived in Germany was significantly safer. Whereas where we moved to in Turkey, it was a really messed up environment full of fighting, drugs, knife fights, and so on. But this is just how people's perception of society is so warped and messed up because of the religious aspect, the religious influence of Islam in this case, which says if it's non-Islamic, it's bad. If it's Muslim, it's good.
Right. It's this sort of blind trust of, it's fine. I grew up with something similar. It's like, oh, you can trust them. They're Mormon. But there's, as we've seen and we've shown on this channel, that does not mean anything. So what happened when you moved in your teen years? I'm sure, that's it's a hard time, that those teen years, and you're completely moving to another country, a completely different environment. And you said this is around the time where you started rebelling, right?
Yeah. My parents thought, like many others, they were probably told that we would eventually get used to it. I would eventually get over it. Apparently, they didn't really learn more about how their actual child, how I was. I never got over it. I never really adjusted to it. And the thing is, the environment in Germany was always so warm and nice. In fact, as we were moving from Germany to Turkey, teachers at my school, together with the director of the school, did a special thing where the teachers came together and invited my parents to school and tried to convince them to somehow not move at this point, or to at least leave me there under the care of people they trust, to have me in this environment, which is amazing to me to this day, because this is that they actually put in this effort to care and to do something about this. Of course, unfortunately, as ridiculous as it may sound, my parents didn't really interpret that as a good thing. They interpreted that as, whether these teachers actually think that way or not, as a way to corrupt a regular Muslim Turkish family and corrupt their child.
Wow.
So this is what we dealt with. And of course, all the efforts were vain. We moved to Turkey. I was around the age of 16. I loved Germany a lot. I hated Turkey as soon as I arrived. Everything was way different. And one of the things that bothered me the most was the interactions between the genders. Because when I was in Germany, I really appreciated being in an environment where, boys and girls, men, women, everyone is friends, hangs out together. Nobody thinks, oh no, we shouldn't be talking to each other. This is bad. And I must say, even Germany is even significantly more egalitarian in terms of gender interactions and relationships than America, for example. But moving from that environment, where I liked to always have female friends and I don't know, talking to them, interacting with them, moving to Turkey, where then there's this whole mindset of no, boys and girls should not be friends, and even when they are friends, even when they are okay talking together, there are always these weird, awkward rules all around it, and women are treated very, very much like lesser people, dumber people. Women are told that they should behave, should not laugh, should not talk loudly. In fact, a Turkish politician at that time, when I was in Turkey, made this whole statement on TV saying that the Turkish women have become too corrupted, and where is the ideal woman who looks down when she's outside, who speaks softly and quietly, who does not laugh out loud like corrupt people and things like that. This is the environment that I came into. And along with all of the other disorder in Turkey, general attitudes, ignorance, intolerance, religiosity, Turkish nationalism, I didn't like any part of it. And at some point, this, I think, turned me toward just going this path of communist, socialist attitude, where I actually thought the solution to the world's problems is to overthrow any system and install a communist system where everyone is equal. And this should even be done by force.
That's so interesting, from one extreme to another extreme.
Yeah.
Before we get into that, though, I want to go back, because I find it really interesting that as a teenager who was interacting with girls and women, all of a sudden is thrust into this world where it's seen as wrong. And I would imagine that when you are thrown into this society that's supposed to be like a purist society, and they have the best of intentions, or at least that's what they say, for this to be in place, now you're kind of trying to deal with the thoughts of, wait, was I wrong before for talking to girls, or was I doing something wrong? Or having to shift your entire perspective into what is seen as good and healthy and pure. I just imagine that would be so confusing for a 16-year-old.
Yes, it was. It was it was too much. It was a major shift. And as said, the mere fact that I, when I was in Germany, that I was so German, that I absorbed the way Germans are and Germans act and feel, made it all much more difficult when I was in Turkey. It was pretty harsh. It was pretty harsh, I must say. And so some people will argue that Turkey is a secular country where people are not like, let's say, Saudi Arabia, for example, where there is an extreme segregation. Yes, I agree. However, it is still significantly more different from Germany, for example. And there are just too many unacceptably bad things. I mean, we talk about women's rights in the world and how women are treated in the world, and people have complaints about certain things that women go through in the West, and I even agree to great extents. But a Muslim country, even a secular Muslim country, is significantly worse. In fact, there was an incident maybe 10 years ago or so, where a nationwide scandal happened, where a high school girl after school went into a small bus that was operated by some terrible person who decided to drive into the woods when it was dark, and he sexually assaulted her, took advantage of her. Then apparently, as she was resisting, hit her and thought that he had killed her. So didn't really know what to do. He called his parents or his father. His father then came to help, and together they actually then killed the girl and found a way to get rid of her body. And in very graphic ways that I just don't want to talk about further. When she disappeared, this became news, and they quickly tracked it down to that person, to that driver, and they then admitted everything that happened. And they also had a bunch of evidence on their fingers still being hurt while fighting with the girl and all that. It was shocking that this is happening. However, a major celebrity who to this day is still quite popular said something in response to that, which is, why was she outside and why was she wearing a skirt? A skirt that is not even very short, that just goes to her knees, And I think there was a poll where almost half of the population agreed with the statement, why was she outside and why was she wearing a skirt? And I don't know. It's just, I don't even know what to say anymore when I think back about that. But that is basically the environment, and it's really, really messed up to live in such a place after having a completely opposite view of an ideal society for men and women.
Mm-hmm. What were some of those rules like in a practical sense? Were you not allowed to talk to girls outside, or was your school system different, or what are the things that completely changed for you?
Well, in practice, since Turkey is officially a secular country, which was enforced actually by the founder of modern Turkey in 1923, there are no direct rules restricting any things. Mm-hmm. There are certain rules in terms of inheritance differences between men and women, for example, which actually exist. But there is just a whole social aspect of it, where socially it is expected in a regular environment, especially in a conservative environment, that girls and boys are separated, that they don't sit together, they don't walk together, they're not friends, they're not left alone in a room together, which is very, very bad. Otherwise, things could go wrong. So we should always be on the watch for that. Different things like that. Always taboos on what topics you can talk about if men and women are together in one room, what you can't talk about. Skin contact, even touching somebody's hand can be seen as something very, very wrong and very bad, and something to avoid. I learned from my family always that men and women are not supposed to shake hands, and my parents always demonstrated that in a very, very strict way. And this is actually an Islamic rule. Muhammad himself says, according to the tradition, I forgot the wording, but that it is just terribly bad, and he would prefer that than holding something burning to touching another woman's hand, for example. Things like that. I don't know. I just had a lot of stuff on my mind right now, but I forgot. So
yeah, that's a lot and a big shift for sure. So what was your home life like? What were your parents like? Were they loving towards each other, loving toward you? What was it like at home?
There is one very good thing that I can say about my parents, which I still appreciate to this day. They were always very respectful and very nice to each other and loving to each other. In fact, I would say that I only saw them fight and seriously argue probably once or twice in my whole life. So they were always very, very nice with each other, very good with each other. And so I barely ever experienced any kind of disrespect by my parents toward each other. And this is kind of an example that that I learned and that I guess adopted in a way as well. When it comes to behavior toward us in Islam, in a Muslim society, children are not treated quite the same way as they are treated in a Western society. In the West, you have it is quite normal that the adults care a lot about, for example, the birthdays of kids, and come together and arrange a nice birthday, gifts, ask them how they're doing and what their interests are, and things like that, which I really appreciate when I see it here in America. And I try to adopt that as much as I can as well. In Muslim culture, children are treated more with a sense of discipline rather than care and love. So the priority is that you raise children as soon as possible into serious, responsible adults who are not to engage in much fun and stuff that is unnecessary. I wasn't allowed to listen to music as a child, as a teenager. It was banned. It was not allowed because it was considered haram, not allowed in Islam.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents couldn't really prevent it because I've always had a very musical mind, and I was always like secretly listening to it. So at some point they came to accept that I'm doing it, but they would not allow it if I do it next to them. Taking in movies, shows, the culture in general was very restricted. There was a lack of information on the sexual front specifically. And this is actually a very big problem among Muslims, that Muslim society has a great lack in sex education. I learned nothing, nothing at all from my parents and the environment and the Muslim teachers and all that. Everything was totally foreign to me. Sexual things, gender-related things are generally great taboo. You don't talk about them. You're meant to always learn that you are supposed to pray. If you're not praying, you are to be disciplined, which includes beatings. Actually, that's permissible in Islam. It's actually advised that you should teach your children to observe the daily prayers, the 5 daily prayers. If they don't do it when they reach the age of reason, then you have to force them to do it and basically beat them into doing it. So I did experience beatings quite a bit from my parents, and for whenever we didn't abide by any of the other rules.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. So as a teenager, you're starting to rebel. You are joining these communist parties. Are your parents just losing their mind?
Yeah. Yes. So it's funny because I learned also from very early on that communism is something that is unacceptable and evil and horrible, and it's like, I don't know, satanic or something like that. And there's also a cultural aspect of it, which is that Turkey has a quite recent history with modern politics, which started in the early 20th century. And around the 60s and 70s and the 80s, the fight between communism and ultra-nationalism became a very big national issue among Turks in Turkey. And there was a big fight between hardcore communists and ultra-nationalists. And Turks in general have developed this great hatred toward any, socialist communist idea, much more so than the whole Red Scare, Cold War remnants that you have in America. So it was totally unacceptable in my family. But I turned toward communism and openly started, praising it and advocating for it and listening to communist music in Turkey and things like that. And this was totally unacceptable to my parents. And this actually led to getting kicked out and told by my father to get out and never come back several times. Of course, it wasn't really ever truly implemented because every time I would leave and be outside for a few hours, and then I would receive a phone call from my mother just sounding very sad and asking me to please come home.
Mm.
So my mother was always very, very sensitive and loving, although she was also very angry about my communist attitude and all that. But it was, it was a big problem that really made things quite exciting around that time between me and my family, me and my parents, and also between me and society, school, and others outside in general, because as much as my parents hated, people outside hated it as well. And that really got me in trouble over time in school.
So I want to get into your mind, your 16, 17-year-old mind. So why do you think, looking back now, that you chose to rebel to that extent? Was it because you didn't want to practice Islam in the way that you were being taught, or did it have nothing to do with that and you just wanted to rebel as a teenager? Why did you do all of that?
The funny thing is, even when I was a communist, I still had respect for my religious beliefs, and I still held on to believing in Allah and not disrespecting Islam. And still, for example, saying like whenever you eat in Islam, you're supposed to say Bismillah in the name of Allah. I would still do that throughout the entire time. So it wasn't an active, conscious opposition to Islam. It was more toward a society influenced by Islam and by nationalist ideas. And the whole issue with gender, the ultra-nationalist attitudes in Turkey. Turkish people are very hardcore nationalists. I find it funny, people complain about racism and when somebody says something in the West, and every single time I think that's not racism. If you if you heard what the average person says in Turkey, you would have a heart attack. But this whole Turkish history, Turkish nationalism, gender issues, injustice, corruption, poverty, things like that, I think drove me toward. And then my grievances with not wanting to be in Turkey, being angry at my parents for forcing this on me and so on. I guess something along those lines pushed me toward really communist extremism.
Okay.
It's funny because my aunt, who later had an influence and who died, she was one of the people who was throughout those years, although she was still in Germany and I was in Turkey, she always stayed in touch with me and was very understanding and understood where I'm coming from, but also often told me, it's not really a good solution, and it's a bit silly, to be honest. And I think you should think about that again, and we should go different ways. We should find different solutions that are better for everyone. And this is just a phase and all that. And she's the only person that I wouldn't get angry at for telling me these things.
Oh, that's really sweet. She really took the time to try and understand you. Are you comfortable talking about what happened to her and why?
Yeah, I think so, because it's because I think it played a big role. And for a long time, I kind of, despite mentioning it very early on in my activism, I didn't want I didn't want to talk about her very much, because I was conflicted about why I'm talking about her. But I kind of understand now that she would probably agree with me talking about her. And I think it's important to bring it up, to make a point. Yeah. So what happened is, my aunt was, when she was in Germany, among my relatives and family, she was always a little bit of an outsider. My parents were very religious. Other relatives were very religious. And in general, these relatives were quite conservative, even if some of them were not very religious. She was very different. She was young and independent, very intelligent, went her own way. She would go out and want to explore the world, go to different countries, travel, see what's going on in different parts of the world, like to know more about other cultures. She had relationships when this was unacceptable for us, for the kids to have love relationships. She brought a boyfriend home once to all the relatives, and everyone was so ashamed and found it horrible. But she was always a free spirit who wanted to go her own way and do things the way she wants to do them. And she was quite an inspiration. Sometimes when we were still in Germany, she would spend time with us, just pick us up and drive us around and take us to a store and say, hey, pick out a CD, of a song that you like or something like that. She was cool. When we moved to Turkey, she was one of the people who got in touch with me and who remained in touch, who sent me books to read, who would send me money hidden in those books just for me with a note. She would message with me back then we had MSN Messenger.
Yes.
Yeah. Very fun times.
Yeah.
She would message through that with me, always ask, hey, what's going on? Haven't seen you in a few days. What's up? And always check on me. And it was very nice because she was much older than I was. She was my aunt, the younger sister of my father, but she was like a very caring older sister that I never had to me, and it was very good. The issue is that I guess her independence and her curiosity for different things led her down a path that she became interested in being religious at some point because she started thinking, I fought so much with my brothers and with the relatives because of the way I am, because I'm not like them. Maybe I should try to explore the whole religion aspect and understand it and try to be more like them. Maybe there is something good in this. Maybe I should settle down and be more traditional. And she actually met some guy from Turkey and started, building a relationship with that person and marrying eventually that man. And through the marriage, that guy then obtained his right to move to Germany and live with her over there. And as soon as that happened, things didn't go very well. And she told me on occasion that she's feeling bad because of the guy. It didn't take very long for her to initiate a separation and divorce process. But before that happened, he did hit her on several occasions and threaten her and really yell and insult her. And he started going really crazy because she's independent and she just acts like a normal person and does whatever a normal person does, going to work, talking to other people, chatting with people, playing a game, like a game of chess or something when she has a time online. And he would be like, she told me at one point that he came home to her playing chess with people on Facebook back then. And there were other people in that room, and he came home and started asking questions about who these people are and why she's being such a whore, and then started yelling at her, and she ran into the bathroom and said, leave me alone, get out of here. And then he went there and started punching and kicking the bathroom door, and then eventually yelled things at her like, I will come for you, you will see, you will not get away with this. And she waited in the bathroom until it was over. And the next day, I think the same night, she called the police. Then the police came and picked him up and brought him away. She then filed a report. The police was to make sure that he can no longer approach her until up to a certain distance. And she then initiated the divorce process after obtaining this permission. After obtaining the what do you call that?
Restraining order?
Yeah, there's a restraining order. And she also told me at that time that he said, as he was leaving, he said, I will kill you and I will kill your parents. Oh. You better watch out. And when she told me that, she said, but please, hey, I'm telling you this right now because I don't think anything is actually going to happen. He's just bluffing. He's just an idiot. And soon he will be removed. So just please keep this to yourself. Don't tell anybody. I don't want anyone to just say, we were right. We told you not to go your own way. And I listened to her, as I always do, and I didn't tell anybody. And several days later, as I was in school, and this is something that really had an impact on my religiosity, I was on a regular school day. For the first time, I had this thing happening to my eye. My eye was severely twitching, and I had a big headache and felt so heavy, and my head felt so heavy, and I thought, I have to go home. And I very rarely did this. I said, I asked for permission and went home, arrived at home, took a nap. I just collapsed on the bed and fell asleep and woke up later that evening. Went into the living room and saw my mother crying. Asked her, what's happening? Why are you crying? And she said, your aunt. And I was like, what happened to her? She got shot. And that's a very, very messed up thing to hear after that whole, after all the experiences. And I said, are you joking? And she said, how could I joke about something like this? Just look here, look it up. And she had the computer with her, and I could already see news articles about it from Germany, from the place she lived, talking about how the person known by these initials was picking up medicine for her parents when the guy whom she was divorcing approached from the other side of the street, had a brief interaction with her and said a few things, and then shot at her 12 times in her face.
Oh my gosh.
Before eventually shooting himself in the head. And she was declared dead, I think, immediately. I don't know. It was really bad. After it's just initially hard to take in. After a few days, after the whole trying to accept the situation, it's feeling like I'm going crazy. This can't be possibly true. My mindset switched to, why in the world is this guy still alive? Because he was in a coma after he shot himself. And all I thought at that point, and I guess this is just the state of mind that happens when such a thing occurs. All I thought was, I just want to find a way to go there and to take that guy out of the hospital and kill him. Or I want somebody else to do it. I want us to get together and do this. How can this guy still be alive? And I don't know. Later, he died a few days later. After that, we went to her funeral to bury her. I went to her grave after everybody else left. I just spent a long time sitting at the grave and just talking and hoping that she could hear me, and just crying, feeling sorry for listening to her when she told me to not tell anybody about this. I thought, I wish I could have prevented this. But the thing is, this sent me down a very, very dark path, but also a line of questioning the things that happened on that day that she got killed. As you remember, I said that that on that day I was at school, and I had this heavy twitching and headache, and felt so heavy and weird, and went home and fell asleep. This never happened before, and I thought, what was that about? And the thing is also, when I went home on that day, and this is why my mother remembers this very well as well. When I went home, I said to my mother, my eye is doing this thing. I don't know why. What is happening? And my parents always believed in this mysticist aspect of Islam, which has a long history in Turkey. And they had this famous book of interpretations by a mystical scholar about different things that happen with the body. And that book said something like, when your eyes twitch, if this eye twitches, it is a sign that something good might happen. If that eye twitches, it's a sign that something bad might happen. And it was that eye. And she said, well, that book says it might be something bad might be about to happen.
Whoa.
And I was like, yeah, okay. And I laughed it off, and she was like, don't laugh, it's not funny. And I said, okay, yeah, well, whatever. And I went and laid down and fell asleep. And then this happened, which just, to me, was like, could there be a greater sign that there's something religious, something divine, something spiritual at play here? And that, together with things that I talked about with my aunt before she died, really made me switch my perspective, and I let go of communism, started going into praying and studying Islam and practicing it, and that's where my ultra-religious journey started.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that. That's so awful. Do you know if any of that was for religious reasons? You called it an honor killing, and I wondered if there was religion tied to it, or if it was just a disgruntled man who did something horrible.
So Islam definitely has an impact on it. And I noticed that much later on, which is why I find it kind of ironic that her getting killed in such a situation actually drove me toward Islam instead of driving me away from it. Because she was specifically going this path and in a traditional way, meeting someone and marrying them because she was wanting to become more traditional, wanting to become more conservative and religious. And that guy was also marketing himself as a conservative and religious man. And apparently he was doing his prayers and all that. And he had a very religious, he had a very Islamic mindset. And although not everything he did may be Islamic, it is unfortunately a very Islamic idea, which has an impact on every Muslim society, that women are to be treated like that, where they are isolated, where they are not people who can make their own decisions, where they're not supposed to just talk to other people, especially other men, where they are supposed to stay inside and do whatever their husband says as much as possible. And he was kind of all about that as well. I don't know why he agreed to marry her to begin with. So that definitely had an aspect, and this whole mentality of you're talking to other men, this is a dishonor. You're dishonoring me, and what if you, just by talking, what if you betray me, and this and that, sent him into this whole rage that I saw just so many times in this Muslim society, and that you can see so often on the news if you actually really want to look it up and check it out. In fact, my aunt's name is mentioned on a website in German that collects honor killings and related incidents. It's a huge data bank full of names of people who were killed as a result of honor killings or related incidents from Muslim culture. And this website is run by a Muslim person, or a former Muslim person as well, to fight this whole culture. But so it was influenced by that very much, because what she did was not very different from what any regular person does in a non-Muslim society.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think then he chose to kill himself?
Because killing is not something that is very easy, right?
Yeah.
And it is not something that you just decide to do. You could even say that Islamically seen, what he did, taking matters into his own hands and taking a gun and killing her in a non-Muslim secular Western society, was not Islamic. You could say that, and this is not an Islamic thing. It's not the Islamic way to do it. He would have to handle the situation differently, go to court, ask for a divorce. Unfortunately, one of the things that you find in Islamic texts is there is a narration that is attributed to Muhammad that is authentic, that I also learned early on, where Muhammad talks about what to do in a state of adultery. Then one of his companions says, if I found my wife together with another man, I would immediately take out my sword and kill both of them. And Muhammad then, in response to that, says, is anybody surprised by what so-and-so said? In fact, I have even more protective jealousy than he does, and Allah has even more than that. So Muhammad's response to somebody who said, if I saw my wife with a man, I would kill both of them, was not to say, no, we don't do that. We have to be reasonable. It was basically an implicit approval of the whole sentiment behind it. This is what is very prominent in Muslim culture. It is considered a good thing to be murderously, violently, brutally outraged at such a thing, at even the suggestion of such a thing. Which is why it's a very common meme in Muslim society that if you date a girl, then her brothers might beat you up very quickly, and it's an actual real danger, and if not worse. Yeah, the influence of that is what drives somebody to become so sick to take matters into their own hands. If you then become violent and dark enough to actually go and shoot the very person you married in the face so many times, it's probably very hard to live with yourself at that point. And it's also an act of despair. What else are you supposed to do? He probably didn't think it was the right thing to do, to go and kill her, but he actually felt like he couldn't resist the urge to go and kill her. And that whole that pain and the anger that he had, also with the despair, what am I supposed to do, drove him to actually to kill himself as well. And I'm glad he did.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I guess I was trying to understand from his perspective if he thought it was justified why he would then turn the gun on himself. But of course, realistically, it makes complete sense. So when you turned completely into your faith and you doubled down or tripled down, I found it interesting, and I'd like to hear your thoughts, how you said that you were finding peace when reading the Quran initially. And I think that is a common thing. And I think you could find peace reading almost any book, right? Not to degrade your experience, but to understand that you were having a peaceful experience, maybe confirmation bias, maybe there was something mystical going on, until you continued reading it in a way that you started to really understand what it was telling you to do and how your perspective then shifted. So let's talk a little bit more about that experience.
This is a funny thing when people of different religions nowadays tell me that that when they converted to a religion, they found so much peace and now they feel so happy. Or once they started reading this book or doing this prayer, they felt so happy and all that. I think back of what I experienced with Islam, and I say, well, I experienced the very same thing with Islam. So are you telling me that both of these religions are true when they so fundamentally contradict each other?
Sure.
When I started becoming very religious and doing the whole process of ablution, which is, washing parts of yourself before you start praying and all that, I would feel, I still remember how amazing it felt, how great it felt. It was such a euphoric, such a wonderful experience at first. Sitting down and reading the Quran was a great experience. Hearing it was a fantastic experience. I felt like I was high on something at those at certain points when I would engage in the worship, which is why I loved it so much as well. Over time, it started getting number and weaker, that whole feeling, because after a while you start getting used to it and it's no longer the very same thing you felt in the beginning. However, it initially gives you peace, and it may feel at that point that it may feel as if this comes truly from Allah or from God or from a greater source, which is why it makes you feel that way. It may feel like you have found the truth. This is why everything is so amazing now. But it's actually quite different. It's everyone can experience such things with religious and even non-religious experiences. There was a time long after I left Islam, and I went for a walk in the woods. I looked up to the sky, and I saw the sun shining through the leaves of the tree at me. And as I looked up, I felt this overwhelmingly beautiful feeling that felt almost like that. And I thought, okay, that doesn't make any sense because it's the same feeling, but I'm not even thinking about any God or anything. I realized that it's just the way humans react to believing, thinking, or observing something outside what they know, something outside themselves, something greater, something humbling, or something that takes your mind off all the daily things that you deal with all the time, all the daily struggles and worries. When you pray, at least for a little while, you don't worry about your daily life and everything that you have to take care of. You suddenly give all of your burden to something else, or at least you think you do, which makes you feel good. I get that now. And that's what I felt then. It's that combined with the fact that I actually believed these are the best explanations to the world around us, made me feel very good. However, after a while, you just start thinking rationally about everything because the feelings are no longer enough. And when you read the Quran, you come across, I must say, among all the religious books that I have encountered and read, and I appreciate many of them, the Quran is the worst book out there.
Well, that's a big statement.
And I say that again and again because it is a horrible book that is very hard to read, that gives you no pleasure to read, that is definitely not a page turner, that repeats itself so many times, that jumps from topic to topic, that has no beginning and no proper end. You just randomly jump into a topic. The first thing you read is, this is the book about which there is no doubt, after the initial prayer. And then a few sentences later, it's like, and those who don't believe, they are blind, they're dumb, deaf, and blind, and they will be punished, and so on. And this is just the whole sentiment of the Quran and how it goes, while condemning others left and right, promising hellfire in very graphic ways, saying those who don't believe, we will put them in the fire of hell, and they will be skinned, and we will put their skin back on so that they can feel the pain again, and so on. Which, like, this is the kind of stuff that you learn. Just behave, listen, or else others are evil and messed up. Don't trust anyone else. And also, don't you see how Allah created the heaven and then rose it up and built it, and there is no crack in it? Look, wow. And don't you see how the sun goes somewhere at night? It actually goes to a place where it stops for a while and then it comes back in the morning again. But these very primitive ways of describing the earth and the natural world around us made me have doubts from the very beginning that I tried to suppress very, very much, because I knew better when I learned about the world in Germany. And the world was certainly not made up of these small lights that are hanging up there in the sky and that will one day fall down and scatter all around us. And this sky that was built as a dome and raised by Allah upon the water that was always there. On this flat earth and all of this. Now, I made a video because this is one of those things that I had a big issues with. I made a video called "The Scientific Mistakes of the Quran," where I listed 60 mistakes that I see in the Quran. But these were just big problems that I tried to suppress. But you are always taught not to question, not to think too much, and this is very strong in Islam: not to ask questions, not to think, not to have doubts. Because the Quran says that a true believer hears the commands and he says, I hear and I obey. And the true believer, when Allah and Muhammad say something, they don't disagree. They just do whatever they are told. And Muhammad said, it is the devil who comes to you and asks you questions about who created this and who created that. And then he says, who created Allah? So whenever he comes with these questions, seek refuge and stay away and stop thinking about idle things. So it is a very Islamic, it is very deep ingrained in Islam to say, don't think, just hear the message and obey it. That's it. But I wasn't made like that.
Yeah, you mentioned in your video that if you doubt, then you're supposed to repent.
Yeah. And that's what I always thought. That's how I always functioned. Whenever I had doubts, whenever I had questions, I thought, no. Allah, forgive me, please. Let me, please free me from these thoughts, from these doubts, from these ideas. Let me do something else to focus more on my prayer and all that instead of thinking about these questions. Because that's what you're taught. And that's what Muhammad literally says you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to explore things and let your mind go freely. It was the point where I allowed myself, and I remember this very clearly. There was a point after years of practicing and studying where I consciously thought and told myself, if Allah is the one who actually created me and gave me this brain that questions so much, would he really be mad at me for
using
this brain and asking the questions and going through with them? So how about I just allow myself to just deal with all of the questions that I have and see where it goes and not block any questions. And that's just, after that, I think there was no chance for me to hold on to Islam.
Right. They literally scare you out of critical thinking. Yeah. In Mormonism, they say, doubt your doubts. It's just all of these thought-stopping cliches that keep you small and keep you basically just blindly following them. It's the blind obedience. And then they scare you into staying, or they tell you, these are your approved resources to find information. Don't look out there. In fact, in one sermon, I guess you could call it, in General Conference, which they do twice annually, this was like last year, I think, or the year before, they stood up and they're like, we know you guys have a lot of questions about church history, but the best thing to do is not research, pray. What do you mean? I can't find the answers to church history by praying. This is not how it works. So, yeah, they're really trying to keep you away from all that stuff.
But
So,
have you ever tried truly praying? Because if you really pray and really, really dedicate yourself to the prayer, maybe you will find the answers. So.
I guess not. I just apparently was never spiritual enough to begin with. That's what they say about all us apostates. You never really believed, or else you would still be Mormon. So, yeah. All right. I find it really interesting because we got to get to the consciousness part of your story that you met an atheist and then ended up marrying her.
Oh, yeah.
So can we get to that part?
Yeah. So there was a time that after I left Islam, where I just started living day in, day out, just going to work in Turkey, and also being very depressed with life in Turkey, and just planning on leaving the country. And I was making plans to go back to Europe and applying for different places. I was wanting to just go back to study and become a student in Europe and start my path there and continue with life, because at that point I thought my whole time in Turkey was just all a waste of my life. And now I have to go back and continue my actual life. I was that fed up with Turkey. One thing that I thought was that I don't want to go to America. I want to go to Europe. But just around that time, I also started going online and interacting more with atheist and anti-theist stuff. And I came across an Instagram page that was just posting things about Christianity, about God, about Islam as well. And many people weren't doing that, still are not doing that. In the West, when people are atheists and anti-theists or whatever it is, they rarely talk about Islam. And people are actually kind of sensitive and protective about Islam because they are under the false impression that Islam is just another religion, and we shouldn't single it out, and that's racist and all that nonsense, whatever. But she was doing it. She was posting about it, and I found it very nice. And at some point we started messaging each other and interacting with each other and getting to know each other and building this relationship more and more and more. And she visited me in Turkey, which I thought, yeah, she's not going to come to Turkey. It's just something she's saying. People bluff all the time. But she actually came to visit me and spend time there with me. So it was very, very, very impactful. And I don't know, over time we decided to stay together and to get married and have a life together in America. She convinced me to come to America instead of going to Europe, and I was like,
wow. So you're telling me that sliding into DMs actually does work sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're giving hope to so many men right now.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. What did you think of the US when you first came here?
I found it nice. When I first came here, I thought, this is interesting. It feels very familiar. It doesn't feel like a foreign place very much. It feels quite good. It's a little bit like German culture. However, there are some things that are very different, which is that in America, everything is so big and everything is so far apart. And everyone will say this when they come from Europe, because in Europe, buildings are generally smaller, shops are smaller, roads are smaller. Everything is much more close together, and you can walk to the store. In America, everything is so far apart and so big, and because there's a lot of space, I guess. I don't know. People are different, but I like it here. I like America. I like that you have the freedom here to think and to say whatever you want. This is one of the main things that I actually appreciate a lot about America. Something that Europe doesn't really have at the moment anymore. If I did what I'm doing here in Germany or in the UK, I would most likely have legal troubles because of supposed hate speech laws, because people still think that anything you say about Islam might be hateful. Whereas if you say the same thing or even worse about Christianity, nobody cares. And then there's also the whole threat to your life all the time. Whereas here, as I said, the FBI is there to say, hey, we will arrange a meeting where we can exchange a few things. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. The FBI is there to actually watch out for my safety while telling me it's totally fine to do whatever I do. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
So the whole freedom aspect here in America is a thing that I appreciate a lot, actually.
Yeah. So what made you decide to finally start your channel and be so public about it and I mean, you're over 500,000 subscribers. You're clearly making a difference and you're getting your voice out there. And that's a really big deal, as we established in the beginning. So what was it that really drove you to start your channel?
The one very prominent thing about it is that I think, actually it's two things, but one of them is more personal. The other is more us outside of me. The personal aspect of it is that I feel like I have resentment and a sense of injustice done as a result of growing up with Islam and living in Muslim society and living around Muslims, living under an Islamic mindset. I thought, I really don't like how Islam shaped me and shaped us. So I want to speak against it. I want to speak out about it. The less personal aspect is that that I look out into the world and I see that in the West, a lot of people try to paint this picture of Islam as if it is this misunderstood, totally cool, peaceful, nice, insightful, tolerant religion, and that that it needs to be protected from criticism and from harm, that Islamophobia is a big problem, which includes criticizing Islam. And at the forefront of this are Muslim preachers and Muslim apologists who, it has to be said, who very often deliberately misrepresent Islam and sometimes just by omission lie about Islam and depict it as something that is okay. Islam is not okay. Islam is contrary to everything that has made society great in the West. Islam is about expansionism, about fighting, about hating, about othering other people, especially about, as said, hating Jews and hating disbelievers in general, punishing apostates. It's funny because nowadays there are lots of people, even with our conversation right now that we are having, with all the personal things aside, there will be people who will react, with a little bit of a little bit sensitively toward this because we're talking about Islam and we are mentioning how Islam has problems, and people have this whole idea of, oh no, I don't want to say anything bad about Islam. I don't want to hear anything bad about Islam. This is problematic. This is bigotry. But the issue is, Islam really is like that. Why would I care? Why would I care about these sensitivities when I, as an apostate, as somebody who has left Islam, am under a death penalty in Islam, which Islamic apologists prominently and openly say nobody steps up to stop them. Nobody steps up to side to help us apostates, ex-Muslims, or blasphemers to say, hey, no, you guys, you can't make these death threats. We are basically on our own here. This is also something that really disappointed me about Western atheists and anti-theists who have a background with Christianity. Most often they do have a background with Christianity and they focus on Christianity, which is understandable. But so often we see that a lot of these anti-theists, even when they choose us as allies, ignore the things that we deal with and sometimes even step up to protect Islam and Muslim culture from criticism, and that is just nothing but harmful to those of us who are threatened and mistreated. There are ex-Muslim organizations around the world that care about ex-Muslims who are threatened and who have no place to go. This is Islam. There is no other religion that acts like this. We are being threatened and told that we should be executed, and in an ideal future, we will be executed. This is what we are being told. In the UK, we have people who are saying we are now in a place to influence politics slowly, and if we are the majority, we will have to implement Islamic laws, and then you will be killed. These are things that they are saying nowadays, and we are supposed to just sit here and be like, oh, let's not talk about Islam because that's a sensitive issue. It's all that. So anyway, all of these misrepresentations, lies, and all the truth that I know about Islam, I thought to myself, I have to go out there and speak. And I started with just posting images on Instagram and writing texts here and there, but I thought I have to say more. This is not enough. So I started with YouTube, and I started at a time where people weren't actively talking about Islam with precision and deliberation, topic by topic, like I am doing. So people really, this caught attention and people started subscribing, and I saw, okay, it actually works and people are actually really just not doing it, or they are afraid of doing this. So yeah, that's how I got in, and that's how I'm still encouraging others to also jump in and also talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, you stepped up in a really big way and you're doing this full time, and really it's inspiring, and I commend you for all of the work that you're putting into this. It's really
Thank you.
important. So everyone, if you haven't already, go subscribe to Apostate Prophet. And the last thing we need to talk about is how you're doing now. What brings you joy and happiness and peace other than speaking the truth?
How am I doing now? I'm just living my life. Very much have always been focused on social matters, things around the world. So I always have a habit of not taking much time for myself and not doing much fun stuff, but focusing on what's going on in the world. That's how I am. But yeah, I also spend time with family, read things, play games, and yeah, that's what I do. That's what makes me happy. I like music. Music makes me happy. Yeah.
Yes, right? Because you couldn't have music before, and now you can
Yeah,
listen to whatever you want.
Yes, precisely.
That's amazing. So, Linda, listen statement, your sassy statement as the viral video with the toddler goes. Anything you want to say to someone who's pissed you off, or something more inspirational for our viewers today?
I think I'm going to say something that pisses me off.
Okay, give us your Linda listen.
So, Linda, listen. It's not bigotry to speak against Islam. It's not hateful to speak against Islam. Islam doesn't need your protection. Don't treat it with baby gloves. Don't treat it as if it is a lesser person that needs your help so badly. It doesn't need that. It shouldn't need that. It shouldn't have that. Let us, people who have experienced this, who have suffered from it, who have seen the consequences of it, let us speak out and maybe wake up and don't be so blind to it. And don't stand with movements. Stand with humanity, with peace, with freedom, with the right to think, to express yourself freely without fearing retribution or death or violence in any way. Stand with us. Stop blocking the roads toward peace and enlightenment and freedom. And be happy and stay away from Islam.
Stay away from Islam. Well, you really told Linda right there. Well done. Yeah. All right. Well, this has been such a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us.
I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much. I should also have you on my channel to talk about Mormonism. That would be fantastic.
Hey, anytime. I can go on for days about Mormonism. It's very problematic. I would say not to the degree that Islam is, at least from what I've been aware of with these conversations, but it's still problematic in its own way. And there's definitely things to be called out. And actually, they're very similar. When I sat down and did a little comparison video, I was like, wait a second, there's so much similar about the beginnings of the religions. But anyway, for another day.
There's something very funny, which is that some people say that Mormonism is the white man's or Western version of Islam or something like that.
So funny. I mean, maybe we can compare notes. Yeah. Well, again, go subscribe to Apostate Prophet if you haven't already. He's on Instagram at apostate_prophet. Go check out everything that he's doing, watch his content, and leave those words of encouragement down below. Let us know what you thought. We love to hear your opinions, and also we love how supportive you are to all of our guests in the comments. So if you want to support the channel further, again, liking, sharing is the best way, but you can become a patron at patreon.com/cults-to-consciousness. Our newest patrons, Patty and Lizzie, thank you so much for joining us over there. You can get some merch at cults-to-consciousness.com. Under the merch tab, we have some Apostates Unite t-shirts that you might like. And our C2C Costa Rica vacation is fully booked, but you can add your name to the wait list if you want to be notified of the next trip. And that's all. So thank you so much for watching. If you like these videos, I will link 2 more down here below you can check out. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.